On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, Sarge, they tired of us talking about the offensive line. So let's dive into the wide receiver unit. That group is thirsty for some more help. What will the Houston Texans do to ensure they won't face the same problems as last year?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation! Welcome to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. We are your insider credential media members. I'm John Hickman. That is Brian Big Stars Barfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I saw some of y'all on 45. They let the Bulls on parade out.
I seen that.
Yeah, man. But shout out to the Houston Texan fans out there for making us your first listen of the day. Today we'll be diving into what does not wasting time look like. We'll also dive into Jalen Pitre's future. We kick off today's show looking at the options at wide receiver for the Houston Texans in the draft. Big Sarge.
John Hickman, greetings and salutations.
A salute to you, a salute to all of our viewers. I can't wait to dive into today's episode. So the last couple of days, whether it's been the Monday show or ended off last week, we've kind of talked about either some of the underwhelming moves the Houston Texans have made to boost the depth at the offensive line unit. We've talked about some of the additions that Houston has made on the offensive side of the ball, right? Justin Watson, Braxton Berrios. Those two guys haven't made any changes to the tight end group. Running back so far is kind of locked in, but for the most part, we've talked about the additions, but we haven't really looked at the fact that the wide receiver unit is still thirsty for more help. Like if they go into the season 2025 with the unit that they have currently together, I don't think that'll be enough. So I want to look at the draft, of course, but Sarge, before we look at the draft, your overall thoughts on the job Nick Caserio has done to bring in new bodies for that unit. What does that look like?
I will say this, for when I look at Braxton Berrios, I really like Braxton Berrios. He's one of those guys that will help you move the chains. He's one of those shifty type of guys who has that sneaky type of speed. Now I like what he's able to do if they're need to move the chain, like say it's like 3rd and 2, he can definitely get into those small routes at 5 to 7 yards to help continue to move the chains. I know that when you go back, and I know that we talked about the New England Patriots, but they found something when they had the Julian Edelman's and Danny Amendola's, and that's what I think of when you look at a Braxton Berrios. You look at a guy who, and I'm not even talking about on special teams, I'm strictly talking about him being a wide receiver, how he can add to that room and that shiftiness that he can use. Watson
definitely reminds me of Amendola a little bit. Did you know Berrios ran a 4.4?
Yes. And that's why I say he has that sneaky speed. You look at him and you say to yourself, nah, he can't have that amount of speed, but he really is. I think he can be a reliable piece for the Houston Texans if he's allowed to get the type of reps that they need, or he's definitely a good backup just in case they might have just in case they may go through some injuries like they did last season. Justin Watson, I think that given the opportunity, I want to see what he's going to be like in camp. That's going to tell me a lot. That's going to tell me a lot. Were you not the talent that the Kansas City Chiefs were looking for when you were in Kansas City? Were you just not given the opportunity? Do you have the talent, but wasn't given the opportunity because of the other wide receivers that were in front of you? Did they not trust you? Or, I just want to see what that's going to be like, because I'm gonna be honest with you. Hey, Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter is gonna let you know who you are real quickly. Right off the rip, like right up front, they're gonna let you know exactly who you are. And through a couple of training camps, I think I'll get a chance to see. Oh, okay. So when they do the one-on-ones, when they do the one-on-ones, when they're doing the 7-on-7s, when they're doing, if Watson takes some of those first team reps, which he should, I think they're given an opportunity, given a chance. They should explore what he's.
If they do that, right?
Yeah.
Texas will
Yeah.
let some guys run with first team to get some opportunity to play with CJ.
Yeah, and so that's all I want. So I'm just interested to see what he's going to do. So Barrios, Watson, and we already know Christian Kirk has the experience. Christian Kirk has he has everything, on paper to say that he's going to be good. Now I wish that he wouldn't have had some of the injuries that he had, some of the injuries that he sustained, but overall we know what Christian Kirk is going to be. So I feel like he's one of those guys that'll come in. Of course, he's a day one starter. So that's what I like so far. John, what about yourself?
Well, I look at Justin Watson. He's a guy that, with his time in Kansas City, last couple of seasons, you look at 21 yards per catch, 17 yards per catch. Last year, 13 yards per catch. He's a guy that I think, a body that, number one, the value of understanding what it takes to win a championship, what it takes to look like an elite offense. And one of the things that I think Houston needed to do last year was keep guys around. Like, I wish they would have kept Ben Skoranek around. I think he would have been good for Houston down the stretch. They traded for him from the LA Rams, and then now you look at a Rams coach coming over, what he could have done, what could have been. But he could be that guy to where, let's learn from our mistakes. Let him compete with some of the guys that are already on the floor of the wide receiver room, and whoever wins, the best man wins. I think we're going to see a lot of the best man who wins will be out there on the field. Now, when I look at the wide receivers that the Houston Texans have met with so far before the draft, they've met with wide receiver Matthew Golden. They met with Kyle Williams out of Washington State, who's had some time with Cam Ward, projected first quarterback off the board this year, 70 catches, over 1,100 yards last year, breaking the season single touchdown record with 14 TDs. 3 years in college, 248 catches, 3,600 yards, 29 touchdowns. Matthew Golden last year for UT, 58 catches, nearly 1,000 yards, 9 TDs. Finished the 40 with a 4.29 40, which blew everybody away. And I think that's initially what kind of put him over the top in terms of being a second round pick to a first round pick. Yeah.
Real quickly, John, I want to ask you a question because there is some pushback about Matthew Golden being a number one wide receiver. What do you think that his stats or what he would have looked like if Isaiah Bond wasn't on the field? I'm not going there with yours. I'm saying if Isaiah Bond wasn't on the field, who's projected, to go
been different.
Second round as well.
It'd have been different. It'd have been different because Bond would has that chemistry with Quinn Ewers, and I mean, chemistry with Quinn Ewers is kind of overrated because that don't mean he's gonna find you the ball consistently. But I mean, even when Bond went down, especially when Bond went down, you saw Matthew's golden full game come out.
Yeah,
he's a guy that can stretch the field. He's a guy that can break you down and win. Like, he can beat you with a hitch route real quick and turn up field and get a couple of yards. He's a 17 yards per catch kind of guy. He's a guy that I think quarterbacks in general will love. And I look at this, when I look at Kyle Williams and when I look at Matthew Golden, I'm looking at the comparison of, for Houston, do you want a Will Fuller, Kyle Williams? Do you want a Stephon Diggs, Matthew Golden, right? In terms of what their play looks like. I'm not saying that that's what they're going to amount to. Kyle Williams could absolutely have a longer, more successful career than Will Fuller. Matthew Golden may never reach Stephon Diggs' high peak. And honestly, that's okay to say. Like, Stephon has been one of those guys this past decade. Both of these players, I think, are perfect young, explosive receivers to play alongside Nico with Christian Kirk in the middle. I think, again, Golden may become a little bit too expensive in terms of his draft stock and where he may be taken because of that 40 speed, because he's kind of blown people away, and because of one thing that you and I think a lot of people have agreed on, this wide receiver class just isn't great, right? You got some good guys, but a 4.29 and almost getting 1,000 yards with Quinn Ewers as your quarterback, I think that speaks volumes to the type of talent he is.
Yeah.
And so, expense-wise, does Houston have to trade up for him? because I don't know if he's going to be available at 25 with his speed, his ability to beat coverages with his speed, and having a good catch point. I think he'd be a great Texan.
And John, before we finish out and I didn't mean to cut you off, but before we finish out the segment, I have to ask you something. Okay, I have to ask you this because the two things that we've been talking about ad nauseum has been the offensive line and wide receiver, offensive line, wide receiver, right? So I'm going to ask you I'm going to ask you a quick question, and I'm going to give you four people, right? And I'm going to ask you wide receiver or offensive line, right? Wide receiver or offensive line. Which position do you think is more important to these people? Okay, you ready?
Let's go.
CJ Stroud.
Offensive line.
Nick Caley.
Offensive line.
D'Amico Ryans.
That's a tie.
You got to pick one.
I got to pick one. I'm going to go, you know what? How about this? I'm going to go offensive line, D'Amico. Offensive line. Yeah, all three.
Nick Caserio.
Receiver.
Okay. So now I'm gonna answer real quick before we go to the break. CJ Stroud, I think wide receiver.
Okay.
Nick Caley, I think offensive line. D'Amico Ryans, I think offensive line. And Nick Caserio, I think offensive line.
Hey, listen, I'm not mad at that. Let's bring that back really quick because I got some more information I want to dive into with Kyle Williams, and then we'll dive into Jalen Pitre, what his future looks like, and should Houston go ahead and start the conversation of, let's keep you here at home, young man. We want to make sure that you're a Texan for life. But first, it is March Madness, and these tournament games, the women's ball and the men's ball, they've been balling, man. And FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. So as right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters, like my boy who say, what do you say from Baltimore, baby? Yeah. That's what we do. The Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. Then the FanDuel app is super easy to use. When you win, you get paid, no waiting around. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all season long. That's FanDuel.com. Get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Sarge, I want to go back to that question before we continue. The reason why I say offensive line for CJ Stroud, he was hit entirely too much. Mm-hmm. And not only was he hit, it was how he was hit. The simplicity of picking up blitzes and stunts, something that I really want to see the numbers on, the difference in between how defenses run, how many defenses run blitzes and stunts today compared to 20 years ago when you didn't have as many wide out sets and you didn't have as many DBs on the field, so you was able to send more blitzes from a linebacker perspective. So now I think that, that's why I'm going with offensive line for CJ Stroud. I think if you give him time, guys in the NFL for the most part can typically get open. Like we saw John Mitchell get open a lot last year. How many of those times did CJ have enough time to find him the ball? And then you look at John Mitchell maybe with his hand issues, dropping passes. D'Amico Ryans has already talked about, hey, listen, these are the type of guys I want up front. Nick Caley has already talked about success for a team that he wants to run, offense he wants to run is inside out. And again, I think when you come from two programs that can find guys in the 5th round, 3rd round, 7th round, undrafted to catch passes from great quarterbacks, your offense will be able to move forward. I think for Nick Caserio, why I say wide receiver, is because it's still his job to go find guys. He's done it for the offensive line. He hasn't necessarily did it for the wide receiver unit.
But see, and here's my thing, John. But has Nick Caserio done it for the offensive line? I mean, I don't think that he's actually done it for the offensive line. So with him, real quickly, I think that he wants to get the right offensive lineman in the draft so he could just say he's one of those guys is like he has to he's a perfectionist, so he has to perfect that. And the offensive line is something that he hasn't perfected just yet.
Not at all, actually.
D'Amico Ryans, he's just one of those guys that he wants to control the clock. So in order to control the clock, you got to have good offensive linemen so you can run the ball, right? Nick Caley, he talks about running the ball a lot, and he knows that he has to have some type of guys on there that is going to be able to get the run game going, but also protect CJ Stroud. And the reason why I said wide receiver for CJ Stroud, because if we're talking about today, you're looking at the offensive line. I don't think that he gained with the acquisitions that they've made in free agency. I don't think that he's gained any more time than he had last year. He hasn't gained any more time, so he has going to have to get the ball out of his hands quicker. And right now, they don't have anybody he can really get the ball out of his hands quick to outside of Nico, maybe Christian Kirk, who we talked about. So I think that a wide receiver that's going to work with him and know, hey, CJ got that internal clock, but that clock is sped up because he's not getting the amount of time.
Before we go to Jalen Pitre, I was doing some research and came across the 33rd Team's Kyle Crabb article who talked about Kyle Williams. And again, for me, in my eyes, comparisons to Will Fuller, you guys can take that how you want to, but his slot usage went up in 2024, doubled that rate. Williams' value lies in having more space to set up easy catch and run completions, which is a good thing. He does not project favorably as a run game complement on the fringes of the core. This is all from Kyle Crabb. He also continued, as a matter of fact, with his speed, he's best used in the run game, trying to pull a corner out the perimeter to lift and create a soft edge of the defense. And so I think that's some good insight. Also for the Houston Texans, especially with the addition of Christian Kirk, Sarge, Trey Harris out of Ole Miss would be a great outside receiver that in this offense, what we are expecting to see, could really do some damage. Now we look at Jalen Pitre, what his future looks like.
Wait, real quick, John. I just say I like Luther Burden as well, but I also, once again, I gotta say Jalen Rose, I think, will be a perfect addition for this team.
You are not alone with Jalen Rose. A lot of people like Jalen Rose. Luther Burden is a weird prospect for me. He's been all year. Like, I know his talent is there, but it seems like it's a rarity that I see it on Saturdays, consistently at least.
Yeah.
Jalen Pitre.
Yep.
Class of 22.
Yep.
Derek Stingley just got the bag, also in that class. Kenyon Green is gone, also in that class. The future of Dameon Pierce is up and down, also in that class. But it's time for the Houston Texans to turn their heads over to Pitre and his extension. What are your thoughts?
Real quickly, John, I'm just going to say this. If you're looking for somebody who embodies the word swarm, if swarm was a person, you will be looking at Jalen Pitre. Now, there's a lot of guys on that defense side of the ball that embodies that as well. But when you look at Jalen Pitre, he's one of the guys who, John, if you go back and you look at the majority of his injuries that he's had in his NFL career, they come from him just, trying to do more, trying to give more. He gives his all, John. He's one of those guys that when he's on the field, he's going to make sure that he's giving you 100% of everything that he has. Now, does that always work out for him? No, it doesn't. We've seen some times where Jalen Pitre has been out of position when he was playing the safety position. We've seen, when they moved him to the nickel corner last year, there was some times where he didn't look good there. But, John, there was also a lot of times that he looked very good playing that nickel corner position, something that had to –
It was a lot of times last year, not to cut you off. It was a lot of times last year where I thought he was the best player – one of the top 3 players on the field.
That Green Bay game,
the defensive side of the ball, but yeah,
that Green Bay game, he balled out, and I feel like after they lost him, they lost some of that of what you bring, especially when it comes to the run support. I feel like if Jalen Pitre would have been in that game, I'm not saying that the Houston Texans wouldn't have lost to the Baltimore Ravens, but I think that they would have been able to help. I mean, they'd have been able to slow them down, maybe just a little bit, having somebody else out there who's not afraid to help in run support. And so I feel like you should extend Jalen Pitre just because of the fact of his potential, what he can do, what he has done. I mean, Johnny came into the league and had over 100 tackles, 5 interceptions, and that was at the safety position. And look, let me tip my hat to DeMeco Ryans, because I don't know if anybody would have ever seen, hey, can we move Jalen to the nickel corner position, someplace that he's played in high school, that he played in college some. But I would have never thought when we started hearing the rumblings about them moving Jalen to the nickel corner position, I said, wait a minute, what? How is that going to happen? And all he did was got there and gave his all before he got hurt. And so when you look at it, if you're going to give him another season coming in, knowing that he's going to play that position, it's almost like you also have another linebacker on the field when he's there too. So I think that they should extend Jalen Pitre. I think that he should be, one of those guys that is a part of that defensive unit that DeMeco is continuously building on, one of those defensive pieces that is going to be built in the future, especially young. And I feel like you're not going to get him at a hometown discount, but you can get him at a nice price because, he even knows that he hasn't been on the field enough to demand the high dollar. So he's one of those guys be like, okay, well, give me what I'm worth, and then I'll show you while I'm on the field what I can do.
That's one of the points I was about to make. I was looking up. I think the Colts made Kenny Moore the highest paid nickel corner in the league last year at a 3-year deal for $30 million or something like that. So I don't think, I don't think he does what Kenny Moore has done. I don't think he's been on the field and had better moments consistently like Kenny Moore. So that plays in Houston's favor.
Yeah.
But I always got to shout out some of the guys that I've come across in this Texan space for just being educators. And I'm going to tell you, man, Cody Johnson, my boy, shout out to him. He was early on moving Jalen Pitre back to the nickel position after that second year. That's what he did at Baylor. That's what made him successful at Baylor. And Cody Johnson, shout out to my boy. Hope everything is good.
Player of the year.
Yeah, he was the one that said, no, we need to put him back where he thrives. The thing with Jalen is Jalen is a great player. What I don't like about Jalen Pitre's chances of staying in Houston, I just told you what I like about it. Like if Kenny Moore is making $10 million, then I think that's where the cutoff is, and I think you can say, okay, $6 to $8 million, whatever the case is. And the salary cap is going up. The Houston Texans have just reset the market with Derek Stingley, so who knows? But his chances of staying in Houston, for me, is like, man, yeah, you play great, but you have a coach that excels at getting the best out of players. And that makes me question how much of Pitre's success in this defense could be replicated by another player at a lower cost.
Like who?
And that's the thing. Like, I believe so much in DeMeco Ryans and that coaching staff to where if they draft a corner this year to play nickel, if they draft a safety this year to play nickel, if they draft a replacement, does that player's upside look better coming into the league full-time with DeMeco Ryans compared to Jalen Pitre, who had to get out some of that badness tendencies from the year prior? Does that player upside looks better than Jalen Pitre over the course of time staying under DeMeco Ryans and his coaching staff? And additionally, I would wonder, because of Pitre's improvement as a nickel corner, could that lead to him seeking a bigger contract elsewhere, which Houston may not want to match or can afford? So I like Jalen Pitre a lot. I would love for him to stay in Houston. I'm not going to say yes or no to the extension question. But what I am going to say is, how much faith do we have in DeMeco Ryans to what Jay said? Okay, you made Hove, make another Hove. How much success in DeMeco Ryans do we have in him making another impactful nickel cornerback?
So, John, here's the question. Could it be done? Of course. Do you have faith in DeMeco Ryans to do it? Of course.
Absolutely.
But you got to go out and you got to find a guy that is as physical as Jalen Pitre. You got to go out and find a guy whose mindset, because a lot of times those nickel corners don't want to be in run support. They're there for the coverage. They're there because they're good at holding the slots. They're good at holding those inside receivers. They're good in coverage. Something that Jalen Pitre, I will admit he needs to work on a little bit more as far as his coverage is concerned, but he isn't terrible in coverage. I mean, and he knows and he makes plays, and having him that close to the line or having him in that vicinity, in that area, like I said, it gives you an additional tackler. And if you anything about
At times
DeMeco
it's a
Ryans,
cheat code.
yeah, and DeMeco Ryans that's what he loves. DeMeco Ryans loves the type of people that's going to come downhill and hit you, or type of people that's going to hit you, the type of person that's always involved in the action, who's always seeking and wanting to smoke. That's one of the reasons why Jimmy Ward has been able to stay around with the Houston Texans for so long. I like Jimmy Ward, but we know he's got a little bit long in the tooth, and his cover skills, isn't the best. But one thing you know about Jimmy, he's not afraid to hit. Jimmy's not afraid to hit, and he's not afraid to come down and run support and run cover. So sure, you can go out and you can get a nickel corner, and I feel like DeMeco can put him in position to be successful. I just don't think he can put him in position to be as successful as Jalen Pitre unless you're going to go out and find a prototypical Jalen Pitre as far as body is concerned and mindset.
We got to talk about what does not wasting time look like. Houston got a lot of decisions in the next couple of years that's going to cost some money as we talk about Jalen Pitre. But they got a championship window that they're operating in, so we'll talk about that to close out today's show. Welcome back in, Bulls on Parade. Thank you for making the Locked On Texans your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, we get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Big Sarge, before we talk about what does not wasting your time look like, can I shout out somebody?
Surely can.
Davis Mills.
Okay. What did Davis Mills say? Golf, tennis, pickleball.
The backup quarterback. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm saying like for what? The accomplishments? He got a pickleball team?
No. But
why are you shouting him out?
I don't know, really, man. I just want to shout out Davis Mills. D. Millie don't get it. I'm giving him all kind of nicknames. D. Millie don't get a lot of love, man.
Bro, you and Cody used to think that he was the GOAT.
No, don't say you and. That
okay,
was one person.
You and Coco.
No, that was Coco by himself. But no, shout out to D. Millie, man. Other teams talk about backup quarterbacks. We ain't talked about the Texans. I don't know why, but
for doing what? Holding the Surface tablet?
Hey, man, be the best holder out there.
Hey, look, I don't want this to be an attack on Davis Mills. I'm not attacking Davis Mills. I'm just trying to figure out where this random, let's talk about Davis Mills and give him his praises. And I
don't know.
Are we giving out participation trophies today?
Well, nah, but what the Houston Texans don't want to do is waste the great throw against the coach that got them C.J. Stroud and ultimately led them to the expectations that they have right now. So shout out to D. Millie. But we can agree that the Houston Texans are operating on NFL borrowed time. They have a window in between, let's say, 2 to 4 years, right? What does the Houston Texans absolutely need to do to not waste their time, to make sure that they capitalize on their championship window?
Oh, this is real easy, John, because I always tell people that time is the one thing time is the most valuable possession that a human being has, and it's the one thing that you can never get back. Like, you can never get back time. And so that's why it's so valuable. And the one thing that the Houston Texans need to do in order to cherish this time, cherish the time that they have, and to be successful in this time. I've said this on numerous occasions that DeMeco Ryans has become a victim of his own success, and that's a good thing. That's a good problem to have, to be successful in your first 2 years with the franchise, especially when you were an inexperienced head coach coaching for the first time, and what he's been able to do these last 2 years. But we live in a society, John, where especially fans want more. And so I don't think that the Houston Texans have a lot of time to waste. And I think that they've been like some of these free agent moves that they've made. I personally feel like it's a waste of time. I feel like that they should have been prepared. There should have been a contingency plan in place for what was going to happen if you knew that you were on your last leg with Shaq Mason. I mean, because time caught up with Shaq Mason. He can't get his Super Bowl years back. Time caught up with him. Time, as far as contract is concerned, caught up with Larry Tunsil. Injuries and then ineffectiveness caught up with Kenyon Green. I just don't see what the contingency plan was, and so they don't have a lot of time to waste. And I keep hearing how people are saying, well, if we go in this year, the Texans go in this year, they can do this, but then next year they can, get the ball rolling. They could do this, they could do that. You have a lot of, look at some of the offensive linemen that you brought in. You brought them in on 1-year deals. Well, you don't have a year to waste. We talked about that on Monday's show. And so the one thing that they have to absolutely do, since they did not do it in free agency, John, they have to nail the draft.
Yeah,
every
absolutely.
pick Nick Caserio makes has to be a home run. He can't have no sacrifice flies. He can't have Nick Caserio can't even have any doubles, and that's good in baseball, but he can't even have any doubles. Every time the Texans name is called in order to make a pick in the 2025 NFL draft, Nick Caserio needs to be Barry Bonds and knocking them out the park.
I think because the draft absolutely matters. I mean, they've had some underwhelming moves. Again, when I look at this year's draft and when I look at this year's free agency and then compare what the Houston Texans have done, I just want to say this before we close. Free agency, they got themselves the depth that they need. Okay, that's great. To your point, the draft is extremely important for them to hit on. So I don't know, like they pick at 25, 58, 79, 89 to get their 2 third-round picks. They don't have a 4th-round pick. They have 166, 236, 241. And Nick Caserio every year has either traded up or, he's done some trade in the draft. And so do they go best player available? Do they have a list of guys that, okay, around this pick, this player is projected to be available? We like him a lot. We have a role for him. We are in the dark a little bit about it, but I also think the free agency moves has given us at least some insight to what the direction will be for the draft. And for me, that is we're going to go get guys that can just get us over the top. And that may not always be a star, but they need a receiver. They need a couple of receivers. The job isn't done, and they have this 2 to 4 year window where if you do not get it right within now and next year, you could potentially squander away your championship opportunity.
Home run derby. That's what Nick Caserio needs to be doing. And like I said, John, it's the reason why, I've seen a lot of people say, Sarge, you're wrong about the time. It's ticking. You don't. I put it like this. Everybody's not the Kansas City. Everybody's not the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, look at. Hey, the Cincinnati Bengals made it to the Super Bowl, and then what happened after that?
I know they missed the playoffs one year. Dealt with injuries, so a lot of things have changed. I mean, Lamar Jackson still ain't made it. So his time is ticking. And we also do live in a society, and we got to bring this back. We do live in a society. I think Patrick Mahomes plays a major part in this, that where success is needed right now. It took Drew Brees a while. It took Peyton Manning a while. It's going to take some people a while, but the fact remains is you want to hit on making that run while your quarterback is on a rookie deal. But you also got to be smart to make sure the foundation is sustainable throughout the entirety of that quarterback's duration in the NFL.
Especially when you got a fan base who's been like, how much longer you want them to wait before they can get to the next level?
Yeah.
Been since 2002.
Yeah. Some of those guys may be jumping ship soon. But don't jump the Locked On Texans ship. Make sure y'all come back. We ain't sinking. We gonna forever swim. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. And we always have 3 favorites. Y'all know what it is. Go to YouTube, subscribe, like, and also comment. Let us know how you feel, baby.
And make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with the Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gents and Texan fans across the world, peace.